We've been married for 8 years, and everyone knows we've been together for over a decade, still as in love as the day we met. I thought so too. Until the earthquake. The woman who always claimed to love me threw herself in front of her ex-boyfriend without a second thought, shielding him from danger. That was when I realized, she had been lying to me all along. Today is my wife's birthday. I had spent weeks planning a surprise for her. I reserved a banquet hall at a hotel, invited friends and family to celebrate with us. For once, her usually cold and composed expression softened. A rare warmth flickered in her eyes as she said, "George, you're so good to me." I couldn't help but chuckle, gazing at her with deep affection. Who else would I be good to, if not you? Then, I took out the gift I had gone to great lengths to prepare, a pair of matching luxury watches. The diamond-studded design was sleek and elegant, exuding an understated brilliance. Luca, our son, had once mentioned that she had been eyeing this watch for a long time but could never bring herself to buy it. So, I traveled overseas just to acquire it at an auction, sparing no expense. I thought she would be happy. But when she saw the watch, a strange emotion flashed across her face. Her usual calm and composed demeanor turned icy as she stared at me. "How did you know?" Her reaction caught me off guard, but I still carefully fastened the watch around her wrist. "I saw it in your journal. If you like it, then you should have it. It's not like we can't afford it." For a moment, her expression wavered. Then, she looked at me with an unfamiliar gaze, one filled with unmistakable disgust. I had never seen that expression on her face before. And worse, it was directed at me. Without hesitation, she yanked off the watch and hurled it to the ground. The expensive gift I had painstakingly prepared shattered into pieces before my eyes. Her voice was sharp as she demanded, "You went through my journal?" I was stunned by the intensity of her reaction. I knew she had always been fiercely protective of her privacy, never letting anyone touch her phone, let alone something as personal as a journal. But I never expected her gaze to shift from tenderness to hatred in an instant. So stark. So raw. It left me frozen in place. Unlike most men, I never felt the need to check on my wife's whereabouts or pry into her private matters. Everyone deserves their own space. I trusted her. I loved her. Just as I had always believed, she trusted and loved me too. Something was off about her reaction. Still, I chose not to dwell on it. Instead, I softened my voice and said, "Luca told me. If you like something, just buy it. There's no need to hold back just to save money." At my words, the tension in her brows eased instantly. Then, without warning, she wrapped her arms around me. "You know I don't like people going through my things." I was momentarily taken aback, but I didn't overthink it. Looking at her delicate, fair features, I felt an inexplicable sense of relief. "Anna Collins," I said with a gentle sigh, "we have money now. You don't have to live frugally like before. I just want you to be happy." She suddenly smiled, her eyes curving into soft crescents as she gazed at me. "George, marrying you is the happiest thing that's ever happened to me." I held her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. "Me too." But then, her gaze shifted past my shoulder, and the warmth in her expression faded. I followed her line of sight and spotted a man standing at the far end of the banquet hall. He was strikingly handsome, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his gaze locked onto my wife. And as a man myself, I recognized that look instantly. A possessive hunger. Anger flared in my chest. My hands curled into fists at my sides. But before I could say anything, Anna suddenly reached up, cupped my face in her hands, and kissed me. For a moment, I froze. Applause and cheers erupted around us, and she pulled away with a soft smile. "I'm going to the restroom." I nodded, watching as she disappeared into the crowd. Not long after she left, the lights in the hall flickered, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Panicked screams rippled through the guests. My first thought was of Anna. She was alone. She hated the dark. Would she be afraid? I quickly reassured the guests, found the hotel staff, and instructed them to fix the issue before heading toward the restroom to find her. But I never could have anticipated what I would see when the lights finally flickered back on. My chest had been tight with worry, only to be met with a sight that sent ice shooting through my veins. Anna was in another man's arms. The same one who had been watching her with that disgusting gaze just moments ago. I froze. My instincts told me that Anna Collins was never one to get physically close to other men. Not even her own brother. But before I could step forward, I saw it. She wrapped her arms around his neck, lifted her face to his, and kissed him. Not a hesitant, fleeting touch. A deep, urgent, all-consuming kiss. Something inside me snapped. The veins in my clenched fists bulged as a surge of pure rage and devastation crashed over me. Why? Why would she do this? I could barely suppress the urge to rip that man away from her and beat him to the ground. But in the end, my fingers slowly uncurled, and my steps came to a halt. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching as the woman I had loved for more than a decade shattered everything we had in an instant. When Anna returned to the banquet, I noticed she had reapplied her lipstick. But even so, her lips were still swollen, unnaturally so. And she had changed into a different dress. I locked my gaze onto her, watching the woman before me, her smile radiant, her mood visibly lighter than before. She leaned into me naturally, looking up with soft, affectionate eyes. It was hard to believe that someone like her would cheat. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. I forced my voice to remain steady, trying to sound as normal as possible. Why did you take so long? And you even changed your clothes? She responded smoothly, her expression unbothered. The power went out earlier. I bumped into a waiter and spilled something on myself. A perfect excuse. But I had seen her. I had watched with my own eyes as she and that man entered a hotel room, and didn't come out for half an hour. Like a fool, I wanted to believe she had nothing to do with him. But she had lied to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Anna, however, had long since drifted off. In the dim light, my gaze fell on the faint red marks on her neck. My fingers instinctively reached out, brushing over them. Anna had always been a restrained woman. She never let herself lose composure, never allowed anyone to see her vulnerable. Even when her family went bankrupt, she carried herself with the same cold, untouchable elegance. Even when she needed my help, she never begged, she commanded, like a proud child who refused to be broken by the world. And I had loved that about her. Her pride. Her unwavering confidence. But deep down, I had always regretted one thing: she had never taken the initiative with me. Not once. Unless she was deeply moved, she would never lower her head, never offer me a kiss. Yet tonight, she had done it twice. Both times, right after I noticed that man. And when she looked at him, her smile was so soft. So warm. It was only then that I realized, someone as cold and distant as her could be gentle. Just, not with me. She stirred in her sleep, her eyes fluttering open drowsily. In a soft, sleepy voice, she murmured, "Why aren't you asleep yet?" I exhaled slowly. "Where did those marks on your neck come from?" Her eyes snapped open fully, her drowsiness vanishing in an instant. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. Then, as if realizing her mistake, she immediately shoved my hand away, her expression guarded. "Are you insane? Choking me in the middle of the night?" I stilled. When had I become someone she looked at this way? Without a word, I set down the ointment I had taken from the drawer and gave her a calm, unreadable glance. I was just going to apply some medicine. Then, I turned and left the room. In my study, my phone screen lit up with a message from my assistant. A file. I opened it, scanning the name at the top. Henry Howard. A well-known playboy. The heir of a Howard family. Everyone in high society knew his name. And now, so did I. The reason is that he likes married women the most and has broken up countless married women. He thrived on seduction, on luring them away from their husbands, making them believe they were special, only to discard them once he had them completely under his control. It had happened countless times before. And now, his sights were set on me. I thought his interest lay in Anna, but looking back, I realized something chilling: his smug, taunting expression that night wasn't just about her. It was about me. I had assumed he was merely another man drawn to my wife. What I hadn't expected was that Henry Howard was Anna's ex-boyfriend. Back then, before Anna and I were together, Henry had already been a part of her life. The deeper I read through the file, the more unsettled I became. Anna and Henry had grown up together, childhood sweethearts. They had been inseparable for years. But something had changed. At some point, they split, and soon after, the Collins family fell into decline. Henry, however, had left for overseas, continuing to live a lavish, effortless life while Anna struggled to keep her world from falling apart. What I didn't understand was, why had he suddenly come back after all these years? Thinking back to that night, the image of them in each other's arms burned behind my eyes. Anger simmered deep in my chest. I stood on the balcony, smoking through the night, staring into the darkness as if it could give me the answers I needed. By the time dawn broke, my frustration had not eased in the slightest. I wanted to confront her. But some things, once spoken, could never be taken back. And I had spent my entire life without love or family. I wasn't ready to see my own fall apart. So, I questioned myself instead. Had I neglected her? Had my absence left a void she sought to fill elsewhere? Perhaps that was the problem. So I made a decision. For the next month, I stepped away from work and devoted myself to being home, to being present. But instead of warmth, I was met with irritation. She frowned at me, impatience clear in her voice. Are you really planning to just stay home every day and not go to work? I can work from home, I told her gently. That way, I can be with you both. Her brows smoothed slightly, but her tone remained distant. I don't want to be a distraction. Go back to the office tomorrow. Luca doesn't need you around all the time. I held her gaze, searching for something, anything, that would tell me she still wanted me here. But I want to be with you, I said, my voice quieter. Don't you want me to be with you? For a moment, she said nothing. Then, without a word, she stood and returned to the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. I tried again. I booked plane tickets, planned a trip, a getaway for just the two of us. She refused. I have things to do, she said flatly. You go on your own. Luca overheard and turned to me, disappointment evident in his eyes. Dad, doesn't Mom want to go with us? I ran a hand through his hair, offering him a small smile. Why don't you ask her yourself? Maybe she'll change her mind. Hope flickered in his expression as he ran to her. Anna cast me a sideways glance before picking him up in her arms. Fine, she said, sighing. We'll go. We took a trip out to sea, boarding a yacht that drifted along the waves. The salty breeze swept through the air, carrying the scent of the ocean. I held Luca in my arms while Anna stood by the railing, staring out at the horizon. She looked distant. Lost in thought. I took out my camera, capturing the moment. She turned, smiling softly at our son. For the first time in a long while, I saw a trace of peace in her expression. I remembered a time long ago when she stood beneath a tree, tilting her head slightly as she looked at me. Should we take a picture to remember this moment? She had asked. I nodded, and she handed her phone to a passerby, asking them to take our photo. Back then, even though life was hard, we radiated happiness. If only time could have stopped at that moment. Now, I asked a passerby to take our photo again. But this time, her smile faded. She looked at me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Maybe she still remembered those days. I wrapped my arms around both her and Luca, unable to hide my own smile. After the picture was taken, she frowned slightly, casting me a glance. You're that happy? Do you remember? I asked, my voice gentle. Back then, we dreamed of having a child. I stroked Luca's soft cheek. Now we do. And I just want us to stay this happy forever. I waited for her response. But she said nothing. We traveled to many places, and by the time we returned home, a month had passed. As soon as we stepped through the door, Luca cheered and dove onto the couch. I watched him, my heart swelling with warmth. Then Anna called me to the balcony. This time, I agreed for Luca's sake, she said coldly. Next time, don't ask me again. I already told you, I have things to do. The joy I had felt moments ago vanished. The illusion I had desperately clung to shattered, forcing me back into reality. I studied her, my chest tightening. Are you not happy? She didn't answer. She simply walked away, as if even speaking to me was too much effort. After that, she began dressing with more care, leaving the house at the same time every day. At night, when she returned, would watch her in silence. One evening, after holding back for too long, I finally spoke. You love London, don't you? Let's go this weekend. She didn't even hesitate. No. I have things to do. I had swallowed my frustration for weeks. But the next time she was about to leave, I couldn't hold it in any longer. You're going out again? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She hummed in acknowledgement. I reached for her hand and fastened the repaired watch around her wrist. The cracks had been completely restored, no trace of its previous breakage remained. She stared at me, startled. I fastened the matching watch onto my own wrist, my voice steady as I said, I heard that if two people in love wear these watches, they'll never be separated. She scoffed. You actually believe that? That's just a sales gimmick, a cheap marketing ploy. I let out a quiet chuckle. Yeah. I believe it. Then, lowering my voice, I asked, Anna, we'll stay in love forever, right? We'll always be together, won't we? She hummed in response, her tone casual. Of course. What nonsense are you talking about? God, how I wanted to believe her. I forced a smile. Anna, if there's something on your mind, just tell me. We're supposed to be the closest people in the world. Then, my voice dropped lower. Anna, don't lie to me. You know how much I hate being lied to. She simply shrugged, her expression indifferent. Then, without hesitation, she reached over and unfastened the watch from my wrist, lips curving into a teasing smirk. Since you're giving me a gift, it should be a pair. I'll take this one too. With that, she flashed me a playful smile, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door. I sat in my car, parked along the curb, watching as she stepped into a sleek red sports car. The driver's seat was occupied by none other than Henry Howard. So this was her so-called friend. So this was what love became when it rotted from the inside out. I had given her chance after chance. I had turned a blind eye, kept my hands off her business. I had dropped hint after hint, waiting for her to come clean. But all I got was this. I called her. The phone rang for a long time before she finally picked up. Through the speaker, I could hear the wind howling in the background. Her voice was hoarse. Don't wait up for me. I told you, I'm out with friends. Stop bothering me. Then, as if that wasn't enough, she added, oh, and this time, I'll be gone for a couple of weeks. Just go back to work. No need to wait for me. I didn't say anything. She hung up. I followed their car, watching as they sped onto the racetrack. That was when I realized, today was Henry's race. He had made a bet, driving a luxury car with a beautiful woman in the passenger seat, reveling in his inevitable victory. This was his signature move. Countless women had fallen for his charm, calling him the most romantic man they had ever met. I had thought Anna would be different. After all, when I proposed to her, I had gone all out, scattering countless roses across the ground, kneeling before her with a bouquet in hand. She had scoffed. So tacky, she had said. Who even proposes like this anymore? I had asked my friends for advice, but they were all bachelors, just as clueless as I was. In the end, I resorted to searching online. I took her to see the Northern Lights. I took her to the movies, held her hand, captured every moment in photographs. But she had dismissed it all. You think this kind of stuff works on anyone but naive young girls, she had said. I had laughed, teasing, aren't you one? But now, she and Henry had become the hottest scandal of the month. Their affair was everywhere, exposed, photographed, splashed across headlines. Paparazzi had even tracked their travels, mapping out their whereabouts over the past month. That was when I realized, while I had been at home, trying to be present for her, Anna had been with Henry the entire time. When I took her on trips, she found me irritating. But with him? The photos showed her beaming, radiant. Her smile felt like a slap across my face. In one image, they kissed on a balcony. In another, they laughed together at a hotel entrance. There was even a photo of them standing at a window, caught in an unmistakably intimate moment. Henry wasn't just famous, he was calculated. This wasn't an accident. He wanted this to be seen. And I knew why. I thought back to the land I had acquired, the same land the Howard family had been desperate to get their hands on. Shortly after that, Henry had appeared in my life. A deep rage surged through me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I swept everything off my desk in one violent motion. I gasped for breath, but my chest tightened, the air refusing to fill my lungs. My hands trembled as I reached for the bottle of pills on my desk. I struggled to pop the cap open, and when I finally did, my fingers shook so badly that the pills spilled onto the floor. I collapsed, my body hitting the cold ground. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the housekeeper rush in, her voice laced with panic. Mr. George. What's wrong? By the time the doctor arrived, she had already called Anna. Begged her to come home. But on the other end of the line, there was nothing. Not even an answer. Even without checking, I knew exactly where she was. She was with him. Every day, the tabloids were filled with headlines about Henry Howard's latest scandal, and this time, the man he was targeting, was me. How ridiculous that Anna couldn't see through him. A man like Henry wasn't capable of love. I had been sick for 4 or 5 days, yet since the moment she walked out that door, Anna hadn't returned. Maybe it was the fever. Maybe it was the isolation. But in my mind, I kept replaying the same thought over and over again. If she just came back and explained everything. No matter what excuse she gave me, I could let it go. I would let it go. But she never did. The messages I sent vanished into nothingness. Meanwhile, she and Henry were making headlines. I saw photos of them vacationing in Hawaii. And then, online, Anna posted a picture. Not just any picture. Someone had dug up her anonymous account, a private account she used to post thoughts she never shared elsewhere. I stared at the latest post. A backlit selfie of her leaning against a man's back, her smile radiant and sweet. The caption sent a cold chill through my veins. Anna, I want to be with you forever. I don't want to go home. And beneath it. Henry, then don't go home. I'll take care of you for a lifetime. My chest tightened. I scrolled down. More photos. One showed them hand in hand, fingers intertwined. On their wrists. The matching watches I had given her. In the caption, she wrote. I don't believe in superstitions. But I believe in you. And then. Another post. A picture of her and Henry on a Ferris wheel, locked in a kiss. Her caption read. They say if you kiss on a Ferris wheel, you'll be together forever. If I could choose, I'd want the person beside me to always be you. And beneath it. Henry, baby, we'll always be together. This account. This entire account. It was dedicated to him. A secret space where they had been leaving messages for each other. A place where I didn't exist. And as I scrolled through, realization struck me like a blade to the chest. Even after Henry had gone abroad for all those years. They had never stopped talking. Had she ever loved me? Or had it always been him? If she loved him, then why had she stayed with me? Why had she lied to me, again and again, saying she loved me? A deep, numbing cold settled over me, spreading from my chest to my fingertips. Then, as if nothing had happened. As if I were still blind to it all. A new message from her appeared on my screen. Anna, next month, I'm going on a trip with my friends. Don't come looking for me. She still thought I didn't know. Still thought she could keep up this farce. And yet, in every single picture. She wore the watch I had given her on her birthday. And Henry next to her was wearing my watch. I recognized it instantly. The watch on Henry's wrist. The very same watch Anna had sneered at. The one she had yanked off my wrist with a smirk, dismissing it as nothing more than a foolish superstition. She probably had no idea how much effort I had put into acquiring that pair. A one-of-a-kind set, the only pair in the world. A symbol of eternity. She thought I actually believed in that nonsense? After over a decade together, had she never understood? Everything I did, every choice, every gesture, was for her happiness. But now, she had given that watch to him. The absurdity of it all struck me like a cruel joke. For 3 years of marriage, I had imagined countless times what growing old with Anna would look like. Walking hand in hand, side by side, content in our quiet love. I never thought it would fall apart in less than 4 years. I never thought she would become the kind of woman I despised most. I had suffered from asthma since childhood. After my father's affair, he remarried without hesitation. And me? I was abandoned, left in the care of my mother, who had been driven to the brink of madness by his betrayal. In her worst moments, she saw no difference between friend and foe. There were nights I genuinely believed she wanted to kill me. One night, as I slept, she stabbed me in the abdomen. I nearly died. If the neighbors hadn't discovered me in time, I wouldn't have survived. Later, my mother died in a car accident. And I was taken in by an elderly woman next door, the only person who ever showed me kindness. Since then, I have hated cheaters. I loathe dishonesty. False love, deceit, betrayal. It sickens me. A few days later, Anna finally came home. She looked flustered, rushing toward me, her voice firm. It's not what it looks like. I was just out with my friends. I have nothing to do with Henry. She spoke with conviction, eyes steady. If I hadn't seen everything with my own eyes, I might have believed her. She was that convincing. I said nothing. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she looked at me. Luca ran in from the doorway, his small voice filled with worry. Mom, Dad, what's wrong? Anna instinctively reached out to hold him, but I stopped her. I turned to the housekeeper. Take Luca to his room. Once he was gone, I looked at her and spoke the words I had already decided on. Anna, let's get a divorce. There was no hesitation in my voice. No anger. No grief. Just cold, detached finality. It felt the same as the days I had spent sick in bed, dialing her number over and over, waiting for her to answer. She never did. Not a single call. Not a single reply. That was when I realized, my love for her had already died. It had faded into numbness, then twisted into disgust. If she didn't love me anymore, she could have said so. But why did she have to betray me? Why did the woman I had loved for over a decade become someone capable of this? Anna's eyes widened in disbelief. Then, she let out a cold laugh. You'd rather believe those trashy tabloids than me? I didn't respond. Instead, I tossed a stack of photos onto the table. Pictures of her and Henry, of them touching, laughing, embracing. The moment she saw them, her face drained of color. For a long time, she was silent. Then, she scoffed, her voice laced with sarcasm. So that's it? You had people follow me? I let out a humorless chuckle. Did I have to? I asked, my voice sharp. Your pictures are everywhere, Anna. Do you really think Henry loves you? Her expression darkened. George, I told you, I'm just friends with him. Even now. Even when the evidence was right in front of her. She still wouldn't admit it. Disgust churned in my gut. The last remnants of whatever patience I had left snapped. I scoffed. Anna, I saw you. That night, in the hallway. I saw you kissing him. Her lips parted as if to speak. But nothing came out. Her face paled even further. I closed my eyes briefly, pressing back the sharp ache in my chest. It didn't matter anymore. I had waited. For days, I had waited, hoping she would come back and tell me the truth. But she never did. There were so many things I wanted to ask her. If you wanted to be with Henry, why didn't you just tell me first? Why did you have to lie? But in the end, I swallowed every question, every ounce of anger. I exhaled slowly and repeated, Anna, let's get a divorce. She opened her mouth again. But this time, she didn't say a word. I had thought about this moment countless times. Turned it over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. But every time I did, it felt like another blade slicing into my heart, leaving nothing but open wounds. But now that I had said it out loud, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Anna stared at me, her expression frozen in shock. As if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. You want a divorce, she repeated, her voice unsteady. Yes. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her face, smudging her carefully applied makeup. She stepped forward, as if to embrace me, but I sidestepped her touch. Her tone turned sharp, almost desperate. I won't agree to this. Luca is already so big, are you really going to break up our family over this? Her tears fell freely now, but her determination remained unwavering. I refuse to divorce you, George. I love you. Henry and I were just messing around, you have to believe me. I let out a cold, bitter laugh. What I want, I said slowly, is a woman who will grow old with me. A woman who will stand by my side and live a peaceful life, not someone who plays games. Her body stiffened. I placed the divorce papers in front of her. My voice was devoid of warmth. I'll give you a house and a share of the company's stock. You won't have to worry about your future. Anna shook her head furiously. I don't care about that. You can't do this to me. I gave birth to Luca for you. Her voice cracked. You can't just throw me away like this. I looked at her, lips curling into a cold smile. If Luca isn't really my child, my voice dropped lower, sharper. Then I'll make sure the Collins family is completely wiped out. Her face went deathly pale. She shook her head over and over, but I didn't spare her another glance. And then, a small voice from the doorway. I turned, and there he was. It's Luca. I bent down and lifted him into my arms. I kept my voice soft. Why aren't you asleep? His big, innocent eyes looked up at me, filled with confusion and sadness. Daddy, don't divorce Mommy, okay? His small fingers clutched at my shirt. I don't want to lose my mom. I felt my throat tighten. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then, finally, I reached out and ruffled his soft hair. Be good, Luca, I murmured. Even if we're not together, your mom and I will still love you. Since then, Anna barely left the house. Instead, she threw herself into trying to win me back. She cooked meals she had never once bothered to make before, hovering around the kitchen as if hoping to prove something. One evening, the housekeeper set a plate down in front of me, smiling. "Mr. George, the madam made this herself." Anna stood beside the table, waiting for my reaction with cautious anticipation. But I didn't even look at the plate. My voice remained indifferent. "When are you going to sign?" Her expression flickered, but she forced herself to stay composed. "I told you, I won't sign," she said firmly. "Luca needs his mother. And I promise you, I swear, I will never see Henry again. When I was in middle school, I was the target of relentless bullying. No matter how many times I spoke up, no one did anything. Then she appeared. The untouchable, superior girl. She stood up for me without hesitation, fighting against the injustice with sharp words and unwavering conviction. She didn't just stop them, she got them expelled. From that moment on, I fell for her. She seemed cold, distant. But underneath it all, she was kind. In high school, when she struggled with her studies, I tutored her. When she got sick, I rode the bus through the dead of night just to see her. I stayed outside her house the entire night, standing in the rain. By morning, I had fallen ill myself. But when I got sick, there was no one to take care of me. I had no parents, no family. I was raised by an elderly neighbor who did what she could. But when I collapsed with a fever, no one was there. Except her. She came to find me. She stayed by my side. In my loneliest, most desperate moments, she was the only person who ever made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. Maybe that was why I became so obsessed with success. When you've lived through true despair, money becomes more than just a tool, it becomes a shield. A way to never be powerless again. So I worked. Day and night, without rest. I did every job I could. I started my own business, clawed my way up from nothing. At one point, I was at a banquet, surrounded by wealthy heirs, forced into drinking games I couldn't refuse. I drank until my stomach cramped, until I collapsed, vomiting blood. I was rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night. But even as I lay in that hospital bed, there was only one thought keeping me awake. I have to succeed. I have to protect the people I love. Failure was never an option. And eventually, I did it. I built something from the ground up. And it was only then, only when I had proven myself, that the Collins family agreed to let Anna marry me. I thought we would have a beautiful, happy life together. I never imagined it would end like this. No matter how hard she tried to please me, no matter how desperately she sought my attention, I ignored her. 20 days had passed. She stood before me in my study, her eyes filled with desperation. "Have you made up your mind?" I asked, my voice emotionless. "I won't divorce you." Then, she let her robe slip from her shoulders, standing before me in nothing but her own vulnerability. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she whispered, "George, don't you love me anymore?" I stared at her coldly. "The only thing I feel for you now," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "is disgust." She tilted her head back, her warm lips pressing against mine. Her lashes trembled as she pleaded, her voice breaking. "George, don't abandon me. If we get divorced, what will happen to Luca?" Her face twisted with pain as she dissolved into sobs. And all I could think was, did she ever consider the consequences when she was in another man's arms? I shoved her away and walked out. But as I stepped into the hallway, I froze. A small, panicked figure darted away. "It's Luca." Of all the people caught in this mess, he was the one I had failed the most. Anna even brought her family into it, using them as mediators. Yes, what Anna did was wrong, they admitted, but as her husband, you also have responsibilities. A marriage isn't just about making money, it's about being present for your family. Then came the final blow. "If you insist on this divorce, what about Luca? He's only 5. Can you really bear to take his mother away from him?" And then, my son came running. His small arms wrapped tightly around me, his voice trembling with fear. "Daddy, please, don't divorce Mommy. I don't want to be a kid without a mom." In the end, I gave in. Not for Anna. For Luca. But even as I stayed, I couldn't bear to be near her. So I made a decision. I would wait. Until Luca turned 18. Then, I would leave. Surprisingly, life settled into something resembling peace. I focused on work. Anna stayed home with Luca, taking him on outings, playing the role of the perfect mother. Every day, I saw my son's bright, happy smile. And every time, it left me with a complicated feeling I couldn't quite name. Then came my birthday. Anna prepared a gift for me. I unwrapped it, only for my fingers to still. It was the very same watch I had once gifted her. Was she mocking me? Her voice was soft, almost fragile, as she spoke. I'm back now. I told him we're over. Then, she looked at me with quiet expectation. George, it's been so long. Isn't it time you forgave me? Before I could answer, Luca rushed in, throwing his arms around me. He kissed my cheek and beamed. Happy birthday, Daddy. Then, his little voice softened as he pleaded, Daddy, please forgive Mommy, okay? I exhaled slowly. And, against my better judgment, I nodded. There is no other reason. Just for Luca. But deep down, I felt something stirring. A faint glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had changed. Maybe I could trust her again. I never expected betrayal to come so quickly. I took my child to the amusement park. She went to the restroom. Then the earthquake struck. It was as if the sky had collapsed, plunging the world into darkness. Boulders crashed down from above. The moment I sensed the tremors, I acted fast, ensuring my child was taken away to safety before turning back to find her. Screams and wails filled the air. I searched frantically, pushing through the chaos, until I finally saw Anna. She was gripping Henry's arm, his head covered in blood, as they stumbled through the terrified crowd, trying to escape. For a brief moment, everything fell eerily silent, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. When the tremors finally ceased, an unsettling calm settled over the devastation. I called for help, organizing rescue efforts. Miraculously, there were no casualties, and even those injured were not in critical condition. After making sure everyone was taken to the hospital, I waited. Eventually, Anna arrived, covered in dust, standing beside the man who was now filthy from head to toe. Even in the middle of a disaster, despite her fear, she had kept her wits about her, just to protect her ex-boyfriend, Henry. I watched her the entire way back. It was as if she had forgotten that beyond Henry, she had a son. She had a husband. We were here, too, in the same chaos. I should have known. This was the kind of woman she was. When she saw me, she hesitated, as if she wanted to explain. But I didn't care to listen. I had already prepared the divorce papers. Even after the divorce, she would still get half of everything. She liked Henry so much, didn't she? Then she could go live with him. When I got home, I had her belongings packed and sent to her place. She refused to sign the papers, clinging to her justification. He was hurt. How could I just stand there and watch him die? Did you know? I asked coldly. The child was terrified. But even through his fear, he kept looking for you. Anna, do you deserve that kind of concern? Her face turned deathly pale. I didn't spare her another glance. From today onward, you are no longer my wife. If she refused to sign, I would take the legal route. In the end, custody of the child was granted to me. I had assumed that after the divorce, Anna would end up with Henry. What I hadn't expected was that Henry had long been married, living overseas with his wife. His involvement with Anna had nothing to do with love. It was merely a ploy in our business conflict. In the end, I secured the piece of land we had been competing for, and in his frustration, Henry turned to Anna. Anna, it seemed, hadn't anticipated this outcome either. She had cheated during our marriage, lost custody of our child, and now, she had nothing. The next time I saw her, she was kneeling outside my house, begging for forgiveness. I pulled up in my car, ready to drive in, but she stepped in front of it, blocking my way. Her face was gaunt, her expression desperate. I regret it, I really do, she choked out. I never should have been with Henry. At first, I was just chasing a thrill, I never meant to leave you. George, I love you. There was a time when those words might have disgusted me. Now, they meant nothing. I looked at her with calm indifference. Your love disgusts me, I said. If you continue to pester me, I will have you kicked out. But she was hysterical, tears streaking her face as she shook her head violently. No. If you don't love me, then run me over. I won't leave, not even in death. This time, I truly know I was wrong, she sobbed. I should have never let him into my life. I'm sorry. But I can't live without you. I stared at her and suddenly understood. You don't have to worry, I said flatly. I won't touch your family. For Luca's sake, I'll even help them. She stumbled back, her face filled with confusion. That's not what I meant. I lost patience. Are you leaving or not? If you don't leave, I'll let security handle it. Her words tumbled over each other, panicked and incoherent. Do you not believe me? I'll prove it to you. I swear, I truly love you. I didn't take her words to heart. Until, one day, I heard an unexpected piece of news: she had become Henry's mistress. Henry, ever the showman, decided to make it public. He even tagged me on social media. I have a thing for married women. Especially Mr. George's wife, she's amazing. I lowered my gaze, saying nothing. The internet erupted with sympathy for me, but I paid it no mind. Instead, I focused my time on caring for my child. Meanwhile, the Howard family suffered under my quiet, calculated retaliation. Henry, a playboy through and through. In the past, no one dared to challenge him, no matter what he did. His family was too powerful, his influence too vast. But lately, things hadn't been going well for the Howard family. And when the tide turned against him, he finally came knocking at my door. I took my time looking him over. Compared to the confident, untouchable figure he had been at that gala, he now stood before me in utter disgrace. Despite his frustration, he forced himself to hold back his irritation, which only made him look even more ridiculous. Mr. George, he said, his tone much humbler than before. I was foolish in the past. I hope you can let bygones be bygones. I didn't spare him a second glance before signaling my men to throw him out. Henry exhaled sharply, forcing a laugh. It's just a woman. If you still want her, I'll give her back to you. I hadn't expected Anna's expression to shift in that instant, from longing to outright disgust. I had no interest in wasting another second on a man like Henry. He kept coming back, time and time again, only to be turned away at every attempt. But one day, he changed tactics. He brought Anna with him. The moment I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked hollowed out, utterly drained. But even then, I didn't understand, why had she chosen Henry? Even if life in the Collins family was difficult after our divorce, it would have been better than this. And yet, here she was, reduced to nothing. Henry shoved her forward roughly. Go serve Mr. George. Anna took a hesitant step toward me, but my gaze stayed locked on Henry. My eyes narrowed. What is this supposed to mean? Something felt off. And in the very next second, Henry's smug expression froze. His face twisted in shock. He looked down at his abdomen, where blood was rapidly spreading across his pristine white shirt. His body swayed, and then he collapsed. Anna turned to me, her tear-streaked face alight with a manic desperation. Now, do you believe that I love you? Love? I repeated, my voice flat. Looking into her eyes, all I saw was madness. There wasn't a trace of emotion in me, only revulsion. Anna, I said, my tone cutting, don't dress up your selfishness and call it love. What you've done, all you've proven is that Luca's mother is a murderer. The triumph on her face faltered, freezing into something unreadable. In the end, she was taken away. It turned out that Henry wasn't her only victim, she had also murdered his wife. While Henry lay half dead in an operating room, Anna perished in prison. And soon after, the news broke, Henry, too, had succumbed to his injuries.